Hi there and welcome. My name is Jessica Avancina, psychotherapist, and Yeshua is my spiritual name as given in one of my journeys with Grandmother Ayahuasca. And here today, we're going to discuss in this 6-part series and masterclass all about plant medicines, entheogens specifically, and we're going to talk about the differences, who should engage in some of these, and why you would even want to take this path or consider this path for you. We're going to dispel some of the myths and talk about some of the serious risks that might be involved, and maybe even talk about what is underneath some of those risks in a true environment out there in jungle therapy, which is out where the plants are, or even in more of a clinical setting, or even microdosing. So I'm glad you're here. Thank you for joining this conversation. And if you're here to learn, this is a wonderful place. If you've never done any of these and you're just curious, this is the place to be. So thank you so much for being here. And if you have any questions, please drop them in the comments, and I'm happy to address some of those questions. Let's get started. So we're talking a little bit about all of these plant medicines, but I wanted to bring in a few of the experts, and these are some of the facilitators, expert facilitators that I've been fortunate enough to work side by side in various settings. And so I wanted to bring them into the conversation. So this overall 6-part series is going to include some of these incredible people who have really dedicated their lives to the exploration of this work and the development and advocacy for this work. And I've also included some of the most heartfelt individuals who do this type of work because there is a personal calling as well. So not just are they excellent at what they do, but they are wonderful advocates and healers, really, ultimately, that are called to this kind of work. So I will introduce myself in the next slide so you have a better idea as to who I am and my background. I have also included a dear friend by the name of Elise Aldivar. She is my expert Kambo facilitator and also has walked the path with Grandmother Ayahuasca, and for her specifically Yahe, with a very beautiful Mayor Lorenzo Morales that we're going to be talking about as well when we get to that portion in Ayahuasca. She has walked alongside him and has learned from an apprenticeship level for many years along his side and is able to be sort of like his right hand. So is able to talk from a very intricate perspective from her Kofan tribe experience. And then I also have Scott Gagel. He is an Ibogaine expert, and he has he's a physician's assistant, and so he was very much of the medical world and still is, and then has come to Mexico and really worked with this medicine specifically and can tell us so much about it, and specifically to the areas of addictions and trauma. This is very important. And then we have a plant medicine advocate, Morgan Britt, who I thought was very important, to bring all the different stakeholders to the table to have a really thorough discussion around the risks, and then really hearing from someone who has engaged in retreat work, plant medicine work on a very deep level, and can tell us from her personal experience, where all of this has led to personal benefits, but also important lessons. We are going to dive into the stereotypes because a lot of times when we hear people talk about some of these experiences or medicines, whether it's online, social media, or talking to people in general, you can come across some people saying some pretty outrageous things, and some of them can be true and some of them are not at all. So we're going to talk about some of those stereotypes and dispel some of these myths as well. We're going to discuss the differences between what is a drug and what is a medicine. I hear those terms used interchangeably, or some not at all, and others a whole lot. So what is the difference between a drug and a medicine? We're going to tackle that. The obvious war on entheogens or plant medicines. I do feel like that word war is pretty strong, but in our day and age, it seems as though from a clinical perspective, there's a whole lot of use, medical use, for a lot of these plants and these healing methods that have been around for thousands of years. And so for certain bodies of medicine or works to write these off as though they have no medical benefit is interesting, at least. So we're going to talk about why that is. And yes, I want to have a whole section on the real risks. I do want to talk about what are some of the real risks about engaging in some of this work, and what are some of the myths that we can dispel around it that are perceived as risks but really aren't. And then I separated the medicines I'm going to talk about in this 6-part series in 2 categories, one being the detox and preparers category. So this is what you take almost in preparation of. It can be its own thing altogether, and that is all that you engage in, and it has its own absolute benefits. But they're definitely considered much more of detox and preparers, and that would include the rapé or hapé tobacco snuff experience, the Kambo, which is the little frog, the cacao, which is now considered a ceremony in many places, the temazcal, which is the Native American sweat lodge, and the dieta, the proper dieta, which has a couple of different avenues to it. And then we will go into the deep dive of the master plants. These are the ones I'm going to focus on are going to be 5-MeO-DMT, specifically bufalvars, then psilocybin, which is the magic mushrooms, ayahuasca and or yahe, peyote or hickory, and iboga or ibogaine. So these are the ones that I'm going to talk about. I'm not at all suggesting these are the only ones, but these are the ones mostly in the Americas that we focus on. I am very sure there are many others around the world, and even in the Americas, I know there are others, but these are the major ones that are mostly mainstream, and these are the ones where if you go on a retreat or you're looking for certain kinds of healing methods, one of these will be the ones that you want to look into. So I'm focusing on those. So when we talk about my particular experience, I want you to, I put all of my kind of education, certifications, and all of these things up here for you to just peruse and look at if that interests you. Because I have done the work, I have done my homework, and I am a very grateful student of all of these teachers before me who came through, and I learned so much. Essentially, my background was in business first, and I have a master's in business administration. And I walked that walk until I wanted to switch paths and careers to something that I'd always been interested in. And I switched to counseling psychology. And I went up all the ranks of the clinical work along with the internships and, eventually supervisor and eventually clinical leader at a lot of these health organizations, including county hospital and agencies and private practices. So I've walked that walk, and part of the reason why I started into my plant medicine journey was because I felt I had hit some sort of a wall that was in a way a bit frustrating to see some of the same clients returning with the same symptoms, worsening symptoms. And all we had was pills. All we had was upping doses and things of that nature, or increasing to residential treatment or inpatient treatment. And a lot of this was frustrating to me thinking there has to be a different way, there has to be a better way, there has to be another avenue. Maybe not for everyone, but there has to be something else here. So I started that journey through that, hitting that kind of plateau in the clinical setting and trying to find different answers. Little did I know, of course, as anyone who starts these journeys, that it was going to drastically change my personal life. It changed me on such a radical level that basically the life I had before was no longer the life I wanted to pursue. And that is one of the side effects, if you want to put it in that category. I will say, from a very, again, personal, anecdotal experience, I've never been happier. I've never been more fulfilled in the kind of work that I do. I would never turn back. I would never go back to the life that I had before, as rewarding as it was. This is so much more rewarding to help people on this very personal level, to heal. And that is a word that we don't usually hear in mental health settings as I was in. Healing is nice to have, but not really what we're gearing towards. We're gearing towards more like symptom management, reduction in symptoms, never really truly healing. And when I saw that there was a path that I personally experienced firsthand myself first to achieving healing, that's what radically turned my head towards this movement. So you can see how I've transitioned from a very, climbing the ladders and moving onwards and upwards to someone who has looked within and healed myself first. And then from what I've learned, a little or a lot, trying to help others with my clinical knowledge, my business know-how, and trying to figure out methods and trying to collaborate with some other incredibly courageous spirits and minds who have also turned to this work. And there's a beautiful community of practitioners, facilitators whose heart is in the right place to help others along the way. So you can look at all the certifications, and all the clinical work, but really the most important lessons were learned in the jungle. For me, walking that path, one foot in front of the other, was critical. And I still think it's critical that this kind of work isn't one where I feel you can take medicine at the hand of someone who just says, that they read it in a book, or they have a certain degree or certification. I think this kind of work is different. It's like they've walked the path, they've worked themselves out, and then that gives you the knowledge. Little by little, these medicines start to open up channels, start to open up abilities, start to open up knowledge that only going through it are you almost allowed to access. And yes, you could read it in a book, but it's not the same as that firsthand experiential knowledge and experience. So I put this little quote here together, that the path of the master plant medicines is not for everyone. I really want to make that explicit. And although it is wonderful and it is great, it does have to be, a path of heavy discernment if this is right for you. In fact, I say here, it will be some of the most intense self-work you will ever do. It's almost like you get taken apart to get put back together. And yes, at the end, it is like a holy hallelujah moment, but you don't get there without going through. And so this is why many are called, but few answer the call, because in the end, you will reap the rewards, but you must go through the experience. There is no magic pill. I know they often say magic mushrooms, but there is no magic pill that will magically, with a wand, remove problems, trauma, difficult experiences that have been lived through. In fact, you have to go through that experience to then release yourself and be free. And so this is that pathway. Again, not for everyone, but if you're interested, keep listening, because there's something here for you, as there was for me. So here's the stereotypes. Here's the word psychedelics, right? You'll hear me use that word very, very sparingly and rarely, actually. There's a whole lot of common ideas or what we call stereotypes around somebody who does psychedelics. Maybe there's a particular look, maybe there's a particular language, maybe there's, certain connotations that we've built around this topic. And if you think about maybe the first movement as we remember it, perhaps as the 60s, and the psychedelic movement in the 60s, and the flower power, and the different kinds of clothing and vehicles they drove and things like that. And maybe some of that has stuck around too, of that nostalgia of that time. But there is a certain idea around who does psychedelics, but in reality it can be anyone. It can be the most serious accountant person, a teacher, a nurse, a psychiatrist, anyone who can engage in this type of inner work and self-exploration and healing. Anyone. So it doesn't have to be a particular look or feel. However, there are different subsets and communities of folks that do tend to engage in this kind of work. And that's why I've kind of also broken out the different names that you'll hear nowadays to reference some of these healing plants. So there's plant medicine, which is my particular favorite. There's psychedelic medicines, and then there's entheogens or substances and entheogens. So what's the difference? They all, for the most part, as far as this presentation is concerned, have to do with psychoactive substances. Those are the ones we're talking about here. Yes, plant medicines can be anything. It can be chamomile tea. Any plant that has a healing, and all plants have healing properties of some sort, is a plant medicine. So the ones we're talking about here, and maybe not so much the detox and preparers, but they all have, the major medicines have psychoactive substances. So that's the one thing that connects them all together, and they're all that same thing that we're talking about. But where they're different is that they don't share perhaps the same context. They don't share the same maybe groups of people and or purpose for use. Okay, so traditionally plant medicines are used for healing the physical body. Mostly healing the physical body, maybe mental, but plant medicines historically have been to heal some sort of disease or ailment. Entheogens, I love to break down that word because it gives us a whole lot of context. En means within, theo means God, and gen means create. So creating from within. And so this is leaning into that spiritual or mystical experience. So entheogens are usually for the purpose of self-realization, mind exploration, spirit expansion, optimization of the self. So all of these, right, when you hit that midlife crisis of why am I here? Who am I? This is where maybe that entheogenic path starts to open up. And then psychedelics is mind manifesting, exploring the mind. So maybe even a little more of a clinical hat. You might think of people, researching this at universities, labs, clinics. And so it may also have a healing undertone, may also have a spiritual nature. And it could also, even in this particular case, have a social or an aspect where I'm just doing this for having fun. So it can be used in that manner. Most of the plant medicines don't have that in those settings, don't have that particular side of it. So in fact, we've heard often, taitas mayores from the ayahuasca tradition, that if you're there to just seek a good time, that is not what they're there for. And they might not serve you medicine because it's not there to be consumed for just the fun of it. But some psychedelics, of course, in certain contexts are. So that's kind of the difference. Also, of course, super important to mention, psychedelics also include synthetic, man-made substances. So LSD, MDMA, ketamine, some of these that are considered psychedelics or used as psychedelics are less of a natural plant-based material, whereas entheogens are and plant medicines are. So that's kind of the difference, and that's why you'll hear me mostly refer to them as plant medicines. Although I will caveat, yes, and a couple people have mentioned, there are also animal medicines, like the 5-MeO-DMT bufo and the Kambo medicine. Those are animal medicines. So it could be natural medicines to include those, but we just overall say plant medicines, even though we are aware that a couple are animal based. So I hope that kind of clears up the different labels, and ultimately they're just psychoactive substances in our realm that come to as close to nature as possible and as least prepared or go through chemical processes as possible. So my own personal story, again, is one that I was not an avid user of anything, really. I drink very, very, very little, if anything, maybe just a slight social setting. But that's never really been part of my makeup, my personal makeup. So when I talk about the stereotypes around psychedelics, if you looked at my life, I was the, academic straight A student, somebody who was deeply spiritual, religious at the time. So someone that you wouldn't lump into a stereotype of using plant medicines. I won't use the word drugs because that's not how I see them. But if you look at that stereotype, I really didn't fit that. And I find that in different communities of plant medicine, you'll find some folks that are some of the, most straight edge, I guess you would call them, people that you would never, ever, ever think of them fitting a traditional psychedelic stereotype. So that's one of the myths I wanted to debunk, is that you have to be a certain look, a certain feel, a certain, certain academic groups don't partake in that. Certain people who are serious, certain people who are mature, certain people who have families, certain people who are leaders. I don't think that is correct. So the stereotypes of old may not fit the mold. I think anyone that has gone through a proper discernment and believes this to be their right path can be a good path for them. Absolutely. So finding the right medicine communities is going to be critical to somebody who's starting the paths, because they are very different, and you may feel into these stereotypes and you may think, well, this group really fits this stereotype and I don't fit that group. But that's just that group. There are many, many, many different groups, places, and situations for pretty much just about anybody. So it depends on what you're wanting to experience, what you're wanting to try, and knowing yourself and aligning yourself to one of those experiences, medicines, and or communities tied to the results and clinical outcomes that you want to have, or spiritual outcomes. So there's this path that at first you may be seeking for many different experiences, and that's not wrong. I think a lot of us who started out this way wanted to try out the different medicines, wanted to try out the different settings, and very quickly you find out what is it that more aligns with you, what is it that you feel you've really connected with, the folks that you've really connected with, the environments you've really connected with. So there's a whole lot of research, and then there's the trying things out for yourself and seeing where it is that you find that resonance for yourself. And then you'll ultimately find your path. with these kinds of medicines, I don't believe it's a one and done. It's like the analogy of reading an incredible book about you, the most incredible book about you, and you read one chapter of it. Well, if it's about you and if it's fascinating, I tend to believe that you're going to want to read on. And it doesn't mean that you just have to do this over and over and over and over and over and over again without, any stopping. I think that there's ebbs and there's flows. And I think there's times in your life where you're thirsty for this kind of knowledge, this kind of opening, and you're going to drink, so to speak, a whole lot. And then there's other times where you're good. You want to integrate, you want to take back, you want to go within. And that is all normal. And eventually you find your rhythm, eventually you find your path, and eventually you either want to continue or you've had enough of this opening and knowledge and now you want to go a different route. There's a lot of practices that go along with the plant medicine work or the entheogens, which opens up a whole nother version of yourself, a world for you, which includes potentially meditation, singing, taking up an instrument, yoga, all kinds of practices that you end up developing an appetite for that help support your growth in your practices. So I want to talk about to finish off our conversation here today, why would anybody even want to engage in this path? I mean, this is not for everyone. I talked about it. It's grueling. There are risks. So why would I even want to turn my mind to that direction, right? I kind of shared my own personal story of why I started, which was that in my professional world, I felt that we really needed a lot more of a more natural kind of pathway that actually led to improvements, physical improvements, mental improvements, and spiritual improvements. So I think that this is what turned my mind to it, but I was also curious. I was also very spiritual from a very early age since I can remember. And so for me, it felt like, wow, I can have these glasses, so to speak, that I can wear that can help me see through the veil, through to the other side that I've always connected with from my heart. But wouldn't it be nice to see what I've always believed in? And on a personal note, again, this is more really talking about the different facets of my life. I have become much more of a believer in God, in people, in the planet, in the beautiful things that life has to offer more than ever through this process. So it's not something that has debunked everything I ever knew before. In fact, it helps me so much more understand the whys, the hows, and to have peace and joy despite all of the things that you may come across that can be difficult to digest. So why would anyone want to engage? And these all have studies tied to them at some point, but I'm more talking about my own personal experience, what I have seen, not just in my life, but in the life of all the people that I've helped along this path, the people that I've sat with and gotten to know from all over the world through this path. So these are things that I've seen for myself. Physical health improved. Yes, I've seen a man who spent a year in the jungle, literally came in on a stretcher, could not walk, completely paralyzed with multiple sclerosis, and has taken yahe, which is ayahuasca, for a year straight in microdosing and macrodosing throughout a year, and left the jungle. And I was there on a motorcycle, riding a motorcycle. He took a few steps to get onto the motorcycle, was able to hang on and sit upright, and left the jungle in that way. And he was able to regain use of one arm and was able to feed himself. So none of these things could he do when he arrived. And we know this is a degenerative disease and progressive illness. So one example. Now, is it a clinical study where there are scientists all around? No, this is just something I saw and observed. Now, the clinical trials are happening, and this is a beautiful thing. Now, what are the differences of doing it in a clinical setting versus the jungle? I can't tell you, but there are many and plenty of health benefits depending on what medicine you're taking and for what. We will talk about some of those as we delve into each one of those medicines. Your mental health is improved. Absolutely. The first thing that goes away is the depression, the anxiety, all of these things. Again, it's not one sitting, it's not one fixes it all, but it's a path, it's a pathway. And absolutely, I have seen people heal from PTSD, heal, not improve, but heal. This is where the medicines have the ability to show you the origin, go through it and release it. It's a beautiful system that is intelligent at work. Relationships improved. Yes, relationships become deeper, more meaningful. In fact, there's just a new study that came out that talked about couples who do plant medicines together. And when they journey together, it actually deepens their bond. So if they're there for the right reasons, if they're in a good relationship, that will for sure solidify their bond. Authentic, positive self-image, we start to really look in the mirror. These medicines, that's what they do. They force you to look at the authentic and real you. Do you like what you see? Do you want to make some changes? Heal childhood trauma. This is the biggest one, I think, because I think that when you heal that, then comes physical healing, spiritual healing, mental healing, all of it. So it takes us back to those painful moments. It takes us back not to hurt us, not to re-traumatize, but to heal in a very beautiful way. Reduce life stress in life or life stressors. We can stop and smell the roses a little bit more often. You'll see the reactions improve, the lag time be wider between stimulation and reaction. Those kinds of things. The love for yourself, that's a huge one. How many of us can say, I truly, truly love myself? And so this is the work. Part of that work is to love yourself. A balanced approach to life. So again, you're not so one way or another. You kind of start to hit that middle point a little bit more. Control over your emotions. So things don't go so extreme. It's part of that balance. Positive relationship with abundance. So if you come from lack mentalities or these kinds of things, you see that in nature, everything is abundant. And we become part of that abundance and nature. And you find your spirituality, whatever that is for you, whatever that means for you. Whether it's, Christ, an alien, Pachamama, Earth, it doesn't really matter. You are connected with that which is your own experience of spirituality. The possible side effects are interesting, right? Because some of these you could say, well, these are good things and necessary things, but they are side effects that I do want to talk about. Radical changes in life. Did I think I was going to, up my life in the way that I did, change, where I live, change what I do, change a lot of things about me? No, I would have told you, no, are you crazy? But this process opens your eyes to different things that you didn't think were possible for you, that you didn't think were what you wanted to do, but in fact, it's where your happiness and your peace and your joy lies. Moving on from relationships, I have seen that people find their voice, they find their courage. And so I don't see that as a negative. Some people might, but some relationships might end. That might be friendships, that might be partnerships, that might be, I'm talking maybe business partnerships, and that might also be husband-wife relationships, familial relationships. You tend to move away from those things that no longer support you in your life. Reduced or no drinking, and I would include drugs here, obviously, but these medicines, different than what people would think, oh, they're drugs you're taking, you're consuming, you're just changing one thing for another. No, it actually helps you, and here's the next point, your eating habits, your drinking habits, so things that are not good for you, you look into a mirror. So there's no hiding, there's no running away from the authentic truth. So when you see the truth in your face, you know what you need to stop doing. You know what you need to add to your life and remove from your life. And drinking and eating habits is obviously part of that. Focus shift to different things. So again, you might take up an instrument, musical instrument that you never thought in a million years you would want to do, or singing or dancing, who knows, or even things that you devote your time to. Family and friends not supportive, they might not like the changes in you. We don't, as humans, like change so much. So when somebody that's near and dear to us starts to change a whole lot, that might make us feel uncomfortable, and we don't like that, and we like things to stay the same. So that might bring up something there with your family or close friends. Current job may not fit. You may go back to your day job and say, this isn't what I want to do. In fact, I realize that this is the source of my anxiety or the source of my depression. So it just brings up things that you already knew, but perhaps didn't have the courage and strength to look at directly. So your current job or profession may not fit. Change where you live. You might think the same about where you live. It no longer fits who you're trying to be. It may no longer resonate with the energy you're trying to be around. Your social circle might be reduced or changed for the same reasons, right? They may not fit. The people that you were in a close group with may not be the type of people that you want to be around anymore. External focus becomes internal. So you start focusing a whole lot less on everything out there, and you start focusing a whole lot more of what's going on in here, in your mind, in your body, in your spirit. So these are some of the things that become critically important and that have to be taken into consideration. I put this word freedom here because that's the one word I think that it leads towards. The medicines are always going to push towards your spirit and yourself to be free. So some of the things that you need to consider when you're going to be taking up a certain path like this. In the next few classes, we'll take up the actual medicines. What are they good for? Who are they good for? What particular ailments are you trying to target, whether they be physical, mental, or spiritual? There's a medicine for that. There's a plant medicine for that. And they all have different properties. They all have different pathways. They can be ingested differently, different time frames, different protocols. So we'll go over all of that to find one that fits for what you are trying to do. I think that plant medicines are the gift of, whether you call them the gods, God, Pachamama, Mother Earth, to us for our own healing. We can achieve a higher quality of life, live in love, live in gratitude, live in peace, live in joy. If these things sound like they're far, far, far away from you, then a pathway here can be your way to that kind of life. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you for even turning your mind to opening your mind to some of these different pathways that you may have thought weren't for you. Maybe they are. So let's continue the conversation. Again, send me any questions or comments you might have. I'd love to incorporate them in maybe future presentations. I'm happy to talk to anyone. We do retreats about 5 different times a year, different kinds of medicines. I'd love to invite you, if this is the path that seems right for you, to visit our website at mindfulyouexperiences.com and you can reach out to me directly. I'm happy to talk to you and vet out your particular case. This is a wonderful time in your life, if you found this presentation, to really take a deep dive into yourself and that beautiful healing that is your birthright. So thank you so much once again for listening, and see you soon.